Actually, not sure if I should have made this video or not. It's kind of hard to describe this thinking process, but yeah, this is something that probably maybe those of us who set out really hard goals or have a past that makes it so that you always feel this lingering sense of something missing. So I'll try to describe what's going on or what I feel like and how we could, or some of you might be able to relate to it, some of you might not be, and that's fine. Heck, it might just be one or two people out of, I don't know, millions. The thing is, even not the thing is, I woke up in the morning and I was going towards getting some groceries for myself, right? And I just felt like during that moment when I was going there that this is not this is not the world you belong in. This is too peaceful. This is too relaxed. It's too comfortable. And you're more at home and at peace in situations where you have to fight for your survival and where there's a crisis going on and people have to show strength and courage you and things are really difficult and there are challenges and there are really high stakes and there are people who need your help. And you have to somehow, through whatever wit or suffering, come up with a solution to these really large scale problems so that you can create a future or hope that you can have a future that you can be a part of. Like there's not even the luxury to wake up and just roam around aimlessly because you always have this sense of responsibility on yourself that you're the only one who could probably do something or play a role. That is your strength, and there are stakes on it. And you're in those environments and the situations that demand you to act in that certain way. So, yeah, I quite often don't feel like I belong in. It's more like whenever there's a period of peace, I get this question that's like at the back of my head. I'm always thinking, well, how long until this lasts? Or when will this go away? The thing is, we can always actively go into a position which is challenging. We can set a hard target. We're aware of the fact of what our potential is and what the opportunity cost of not living up to that potential is, and what our future self is like, or what a version of your future self is like. And to be somebody like that, or to live up to his legacy, the kind of shit and actions you'd have to do, which are not normal. I believe that borrowing strength from people you haven't met yet and the person you haven't been yet is normal. Striving for a future and all those things. Are you serious? So this is like something unrelated, but it might like sort of try to find out what's going on. I remember I used to think like this when I was young that if I have the ability to save people, like for example, there's a war, like let's suppose there's a war going on right now in the world, or there are people that are immensely suffering, or they're dying of hunger, or whatever they're about to give up or hopelessness or anything. Actually, let's just change it to the future. Let's suppose in the future, 1 year from now, there are going to be a lot of those people. And if you look at it from the other angle, which is what is the true potential of a human being, you will see that every single person has the capacity to massively change the whole world. Like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Sam Altman, a bunch of people that you would see that are at the top that are having an impact are just ordinary humans like you and me. I don't care what excuses or what circumstances might come into play. It just removes the excuse entirely that there is no, that the possibility exists. And if the possibility exists, there must be a way to get there, to have that level of impact or that level of control or power to influence the world. And and it probably requires things that you're not comfortable doing, or leaving things, or making sacrifices, or breaking the rules and the limits and having to push yourself, and maybe get into these endless work cycles, pain cycles, try blindly over and over again, fail a million times. And but you have that potential. And the thing is, if you did that to some extent, you would be able to prevent all that suffering that everybody else is going to experience, right? So if you choose not to do that because you like the life that you're living right now, or for whatever reason, then keep in mind that you're essentially paying down the cost. And deliberate, it's the same as me killing people by not saving them or being somebody who can save them. Is that extreme? Is that an uncomfortable way of thinking? Maybe. Is that not true though? Probably not. Or at least the kind of people I look up to wouldn't just ignore or brush this thing aside. And I stopped thinking like this a while ago, actually. This was like my early young adult and late teen days when I used to have these sort of frameworks which would feel like there's this weight of the whole world on my shoulders. And I need to become somebody who can change everything for everyone for the better. Because in some shape or form, or through some process, I have the ability to be that person who can do that. And like this is more so an element of sacrifice, right? In a way. It's like, would you sacrifice yourself if that could save millions? If the answer is yes, then it's not gonna happen like in a movie style fashion where you would walk into a, there'll be like one situation and um there are all these people, and then you just like, you're like, I'm gonna give up my life to close this portal of aliens, and then this is not like that Avengers style movie. You might have to work when nobody else is seeing, and be misunderstood and be alone and give up on things that you enjoyed for a very long time while maintaining the self-control and the discipline to have the foresight to be the person who can actually save those people or just have that impact or whatever the future is that you want or believe in. I also know that we don't realize the heaviness of these scenarios or these situations until you've been or come across them in one way or another. And like all these unnecessary thoughts are thrown out of the window when you are in those situations. I'll give you guys an example. Um, Actually, no, I'm not gonna give this example. Well, let's just put it this way. There was a point when my family was kind of like a war had started in where they were living. And this was like a really small thing. There were like two people. But the level of powerlessness I felt at that moment because I was here and they're there and a war is and they could have died. And my persuasion skills were so shit that I couldn't even convince them to move to a different place. Um, it just like it also made me realize that there's a lot more that I need to grow, but at the same time, it just makes you focus on the things that really matter. And I think like that level of clarity that comes in these life or death situations or these scenarios which are high on survival, or when you see like the sides of humanity, like human trafficking or whatever, where you see these or like the current wars that might be going on in the Middle East or whatever, or in Ukraine. And we like to pretend that it doesn't exist, but there are kids there, there are families there, there are people like you and me who might be really good people. Like, like you imagine these characters in movies and TV shows that are really strong, right? Where I'm sure people like that are actually alive, who might end up being role models, who might end up having really strong stories. And I'm sure that us, in one shape or another, could have prevented that or at least helped them somehow. Well, if we can't do it right now, then you could have done what you could do it for what will happen in 2 years. Because this shit is gonna, this like wars and all this stuff and all the filth is happening for a very long time. So, what do you want to do? Or are you gonna choose to ignore it or not? But anyways, let's ignore all this random stuff. And coming back to the feeling of why you or I sometimes feel like I don't belong in this world. And I belong more into the world where there are crises and there are situations that are high pressure. And it might just be something that I have noticed, but I think I tend to do well in those scenarios. And I tend to, things make more sense in those situations for me. They make less sense when you're sitting at home doing nothing, or when you're like randomly in university surrounded by people who are just like passing time until without any priorities or direction or anything like that. And there are all these things that they're enjoying, but I just like, you would feel like that's not something that you could have. Because there are some things that you have and you need to do. And this just doesn't make sense. This side of whatever, like being a student or going to university or living in an ordinary fashion and maintaining a peaceful life is just like not something that I would want or would have one way, shape, or another. And I think like some of us might be just built that way. I mean, I have pushed myself a lot over the last few years in like, why would I? And this is just me observing myself. And obviously, the things I've done are nothing in comparison to what is needed or what would be required. But why do I still keep on pushing myself when I could have just taken the easy way out and relaxed or tried to blend in with other students? There were way too many situations where I could have done that. But instead of going down that route, why would I still pick these challenging situations, these challenging or really difficult things that I would put myself into, which would either induce growth or have some sort of outcome I've done which could have an impact? And I think the reason I would do that is because that's just like at a deeper level the sort of person I am, or the sort of person I ended up becoming due to the past that we had, which some of you might have, right? And we don't need to get into those nitty-gritty details, but like, and there's nothing wrong with that. I don't feel ashamed about that. There might be people who are made for peace times and peaceful times, and there might be those of us who are made for doing things that other people can't do or are not willing to do. Maybe this sounds dramatic. Who knows? Who cares? I just know that I will probably continue to do things that don't make sense at the expense of this lifestyle that I pseudo like, but at the same time, it feels like it's made of glass and it could break at any second. It's not real, you know? It's like the ordinary life that these coaches or these Instagram figures or all the people that you look up to talk about going out with friends or eating food that is good or traveling and all these things. And I'm like, we probably need to come make the next big business or solve this large issue or do something along those lines, which is high risk and has high risks. And that's just what probably makes more sense for me than seeking out restaurants to try foods into. Not to say that I don't, that I always try to stay serious, right? I do enjoy myself, or try to at least, or create the impression that I am enjoying myself. Because that's also something that people you look up to that are really cool do, which is no matter what they're struggling with or whatever problems they have, they still act like they are having fun or have this eccentric nature to them. I think like that happens by default. When you're doing all this crazy stuff and shit that is just like almost impossible, you kind of develop a personality that also, because you end up being generally more smarter and analytical and less emotional. And that like develops these, I don't know, semi-detached, narcissistic, sarcastic, um, amusing yourself at the expense of others, or these, random personality profiles that um is just like fun to be around. Yet at the same time, when it comes to being serious about the things that only you could do and you're capable of doing, and you've set out to do for yourself and for the future that you're fighting for, or the people you're fighting for, or whatever motivates you to want to be like that. If that's who you are, or that's who you're trying to be, then own it. Because same question I've already repeated before. In life, we always have regrets. Just pick the regrets you could live with. I would live with the regret that I couldn't, that I probably, you know, chose to not be normal. But I couldn't live with the regret that I could have done or could have had a certain future. Actually, in my case, it's like it's really hard to switch your brains when you're aware of the stakes or when you're aware of the potential. Like, it's really hard to just ignore all the reasoning behind the things that you should be doing or are supposed to do and just do dumb stuff. Yeah. And I think at a certain point, you start developing a personality which is like, oh, fuck it. Even if I'm not being as good and people are dying for it, um, that's fine. In the sense, in the future sense, right? Like the ones that you could have helped. Yet, on the other hand, it's also true that you're growing subconsciously, unactively every single day, the longer you stay on this path. And I reckon commitment is removing all alternatives. So you could have both as well. But I feel like we need to earn that peace that we always want. And it will probably be different. The good news is you keep on getting better the more you go through hard stuff. So at the end of the day, when you do have that peace that you desired or a future that you wanted, it would probably be worth it. And it would have been something you earned. And that might have been your story, as opposed to just floating around like a meaningless existence.